any given time, and I know a lot of our offices around the world, there's a room just like this. We're pulling through findings that we have and trying to find those patterns and trying to illuminate, again, different answers and different things that help us solve problems in a new way. There's not enough snacks in there. Use usually a lot more snacks. The most exciting part of our job, I think, is that we have real live human beings. And again, think back, I was at a data conference where there's a lot of discussion about machine learning and AI, and our robot's gonna take over this job because you don't really need humans to look at stuff, and I violently disagree. We can't do anything without our data, unless we have all these incredible people. And often we'll get, if we do a big study, as I was mentioning before, let's say it's 30 markets, let's say it's 32,000, pieces of information that we get back. Sometimes there's 5 pieces that are very, very surprising and maybe even confounding. And that's when people like India and Ellie and Nadia go out to the markets and understand, as we're scratching our head, and say, what in the world is going on in this part of the world? And why are these pieces of information coming back? If we didn't have those human beings, that obviously this is from Truth Without a Street, which was awesome, but if we didn't have these human beings who are out there understanding their local culture, we wouldn't be able to do the things that we do. So it's an important piece of our puzzle, and I think it's a real advantage for us as a company. And we get to do it on some very different clients. This is just a smattering of some of our global clients. It means we get some of the biggest, chunkiest problems in the world to solve for, whether it's how to actually be in the health and wellness business in today's day and age, whether it's how to make things like cleanser more relevant when actually there's a lot of different conversation around it. But these kinds of problems present us with tons of opportunity, again, to do pattern recognition on behalf of some of the biggest clients in the world, and some of which we've had for 40, 50, 70 years, which is interesting. So all that said, one of the things that I like to talk about when I'm not with you guys and I'm in an outside world and I'm trying to push forward with us as a company, why we're distinctive, is yes, we have Truth Central, but the reason we have Truth Central is because we have this incredibly deep heritage. We have this thing on the walls. It's called Truth Well Told. I want to tell you a story about it. I hope you know this, but if you don't, and by the way, when I go to a conference, nobody knows this story, so it's pretty interesting. It's when I usually get a photograph taken of a slide. This little thing, Truth Well Told, you see the 1912 under it? You may not know why it has that date under it. The reason that date is there is because in 1912, somebody in McCann thought it was important enough to actually go to the patent office, stand in line, and protect this notion of truth well told. It's the first time something that wasn't a product or a service was actually patented. And that's, I think, a really important thing. And it says, yes, we are the truth company. Now, a lot of our competitors have started to use the T word. I'm not going to say who. I'm on film. But a lot of our competitors have started to say, we look for truths because truth is so important in today's world. We own this. So I would say lean into it and use this. This is our proprietary secret sauce that helps us figure out something differently than the competitors can do. And in fact, it's more important than ever before. We did a piece of research in 2015. This is originally from Truth About Global Brands. And what we found was that truth was the most important factor above all else to actually help people make decisions about certain situations. We did the same study 3 years later, and we had a huge increase. I mean, these are numbers that are head scratchers. These are things that you look at and go, wow, this is incredibly important. And we happen to be the company that is all about truth. So the most important thing in the culture at large is the thing that we stand for. And again, if I'm at a speech not talking to you guys, that's pretty powerful to a client or a prospect to understand, especially in a world where if you look at how people are behaving, they actually feel they need to look at 5 different sources to believe something is true. That's even more so for what we would call Gen Z and millennials. It's 6.5 sources that they actually have to access to believe something is true. And that's a very important piece of the puzzle. All of that in the world where there's a lot of non-truth. So I'm not going to get political. I'll just say there's a lot of non-truth in the world, and we're the ones that stand for that truth. So why wouldn't we lean into that as a company? And why wouldn't that help us make sense of this world of data, data, data? There's so much data. Any panel I go on, they say, Suzanne, what do you do with all that data? I'll tell you what we do. We actually sift through all of that data to find what we believe to be the most meaningful data, and then actually what we believe to be the truths, the irrefutable truths that actually help unlock client problems in very different ways. Okay, so all that said, obviously we'll believe in this stuff so much since 1912 again. I wasn't there, just so you know. We believe in it so much that we invest in this thing called Truth Central. The clients don't pay for us to go out and do research. If they did, that would mean our research was biased. We invest in Truth Central so that we always understand the macro level truths that are affecting any brand that we work on, that are affecting the culture at large. And I think that's really important. So for those of you watching, if you haven't been diving into all the different pieces that we do, we have so many different pieces now. We're 8 years in, I think, 7, 8 years in, almost a decade in. We got 25 million data points. There's a lot of stuff to dig through. James, right? Yes. Okay. So all that said, what I would like to do now is take you through again what I was talking about before, pattern recognition. When you find some of those truths that as a researcher, you kind of scratch your head and go, why is this happening? So we find those pieces. We then figure out what is the story behind that piece? Why is that true today? How can that help us unlock some creativity? And again, for an audience like I was speaking to before, this is incredibly impactful because NASA guy is talking about getting to the moon. I'm talking about creativity that's alive in the world. So a very different approach to understanding what we do with data. The first one I want to take you through is the power of brands. For me personally, this is one of my biggest head scratchers in terms of all the studies that we have done. And what we found was that 81% of people globally believe that brands have the power to make the world better. And I know we all love what we do, we all work on brands, but we kind of would scratch our heads about this and go, huh? I just made an ad that actually sold, a new piece of chocolate. Like, is that really making the world better? But we have a theory behind this, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about what founds our theory. The second thing we found was that 77% of people believe global brands have greater ability to create positive change than the government. This starts to unpack why some of this data is true. And if you look at what the difference would be that brands have the opportunity to do versus what governments do, we still want the governments to fix those infrastructural, societal big things that they need to fix. But we are looking for some other force to actually be able to fix something like wellness, like happiness, like bringing people together to enjoy meals, right? And that makes sense because on the government side, a lot of that stuff is pretty broken. On the brand side, that makes us feel better when a lot of that systemic stuff is broken. So that tells us a lot, and it allows us to put some pressure on our clients and on the brands that our clients sit on and say, listen, you have this latent potential, right? But you're probably not doing it as much as you could. So how do we actually spark that for you? How do we actually do something that could make the world better? Because you can be a force for good, but in order to do that, you have to completely understand humans, and this is where, again, we come in versus the robots and all the data sources, and we have to understand humans very, very deeply to figure out exactly what we would do with that and how we help our brands unlock that opportunity that they have. So really, this is my quick little bit on if you're not using truth hunting and the 5 C's to help you truth hunt and Truth Central data to help you do this truth hunting, you're missing that proprietary data that helps us find some of those patterns, helps us find some of those ways to actually unlock the potential that brands have. This is really just a system for getting smart, right? We get smart about the culture at large. We look for things in the category and maybe adjacent to the category. If you're working on something like chocolate, adjacent to the category might be energy. It might be something that's in the field of wellness. It might be something that's in the field of indulgence, right? We're getting smart about the company itself and diving into all the truths we can find about that. About consumers. I wish it said humans, but about consumers, people that hopefully we want to actually get engaged with that brand and all the connections, opportunities we have. All this is a system for pattern recognition. A system to collect all the data that we could find and then hunt for those key themes. And when we do it right, we can actually unpack what a brand should be doing and the latent opportunity that they have. Because the big truth within all of this is that when people's lives change, the brands have to constantly understand that. So if we're not doing that hunting, we aren't ahead of it to help our brands understand what to do, right? So it's a big one, and it's a big responsibility for us. And that's why we actually set a mission as a company, beautifully designed, thank you, of helping brands play a meaningful role in people's lives. The most important word in this mission is role, okay? It's how do you earn a way to have a role in someone's life? And when you do that, it means you're making a change in their life and a change in the world. And that's why that 81% exists. That's why that 77% exists when we do it right. So one little example that I love to share, because we've been living with it for several years now, surprise to people sitting in the front row working on Cigna. Yes, you're welcome. So there's a really, really important role that we set by doing all of that hunting that I just showed you about Cigna when we started to work on the business. And it's more important than ever before, which is to earn the right to be a partner in wellness. And the way we came up with this particular meaningful role was by seeing that people, real life humans, had already redefined what health and wellness meant to them. It didn't just mean the physical wellness. It meant mental, societal, it meant communal. It meant all the different facets of wellness that you could ever possibly consider. They had done that, but companies had not understood that. So we said to Cigna, you can be one of the first companies that actually understands this multidimensional definition of wellness. But that means that you have to actually do it, and you have to actually earn it. So some of the work that I'm personally proudest of is some work that recently has been created across the world. I think I sent you guys a note on this. And this is actually Cigna getting into the area of mental wellness. Not of, hey, I'm going to fill in a claim document because you broke your big toe. This is actually about trying to be playing a role when it comes to people's mental wellness. And this work came out of Hong Kong, led out of Hong Kong, across many, many markets, and across several of our agencies working together to tackle this need to actually earn a role in that fight to be a wellness partner. And what this is visually, I should tell you about it, is we partnered with a lot of different scientists and technologists to figure out how to visualize stress. Stress is that thing that nobody can see except in perhaps your bodily movements and when you say, oh my God, I'm so stressed, which I do a lot. But if we could help visualize stress as a company, then we could actually start making people more aware that this is part of wellness and then actually play a role in solving that. And I think that's pretty powerful stuff. We can't do any of that without, again, finding those patterns, hunting for those truths, understanding that mental wellness is just as important as physical. And this puts this brand in a much more powerful position of earning that role in someone's life. So that's my first story. My second story is I want to go into another truth area, which is around aging. How many of you, I won't ask for a show of hands, but just say, yes, I'm familiar with this study. We did a whole study on this. Yes, I'm so happy people are nodding. And I'm sure people watching are nodding and getting all excited. We did a whole study on this. And I think it's a really important piece of thinking, because one of the biggest things that we found was that aging is a fear of the young, not the old. Another head scratcher. Probably as one of the older people in the mix, I was even surprised to see this, because I'm constantly living in this fight against the aging. But that said, the data points that helped us understand this and unpack it was that 57% of people in their 20s say they constantly think about aging. That's a lot to constantly be thinking about aging. Hey, all you 20-somethings, when I was in my 20-somethings, I wasn't thinking about that. I was just living it and doing it. But this is a truth, so it's a head scratcher, right? Compared to just 24% of people aged over 70, which is kind of an interesting piece of it. Further, 2 of 3 70-plussers feel positive about the idea of getting older. And I love this visual, which, by the way, is from Truth About Street that somebody took. I mean, I think it really embraces kind of this notion of just positive aging. Now, the truth is, society convinces us that this can't be true, that aging is all bad. So if that's the truth, then, old has become almost this shorthand or this stereotype, right? Why can't we break it? And that's when you unleash some real creativity. I think most of you are probably familiar with this wonderful brand we get to work on and have worked on for many years called L'Oreal. The meaningful role for L'Oreal is to actually give women the confidence to find their worth. And when you add that truth that I just showed you to this meaningful role and determine how we can do that in a way that can be a broader societal or cultural conversation, you can come up with something like this, which is the non-issue. I'm going to play you guys the video of how this was created, because I think it's such a powerful story also of our company and how we can work together and how we can take a data point like what I showed you through this study and turn it into something incredible for a client. 1 second is what I'm reporting from the magic. Just really wanted to be a talk show host, you know that, right? Like so badly. Or a journalist, but it would have to be like for e-entertainment. It's really just music, so you can kind of look at the data and get the point. Do you guys want me to just do that? It's because I said earlier how hard this is to do, isn't it? I totally jinxed it. Sorry, guys. Hayden's about to kill me.
This is the story of collaboration. The more you look at fashion and beauty media coverage, the more you notice the same thing: youth. 40% of women are over 50, however only 15% are represented in the media. No wonder these women feel invisible. Age discrimination is an issue. L'Oréal Paris has always believed every woman is worth it, regardless of age. So we persuaded Vogue to do something they've never done before. Born from a Truth Central insight that inspired a 48-hour creative bootcamp in which 4 offices participated: Madrid, Bucharest, Paris, London, pitching 12 game-changing ideas and inviting the client to buy their favourite. They chose the non-issue. An entire issue of Vogue where every word, every image, and every page was dedicated to the belief that age should be a non-issue. From correspondent Christiane Amanpour to comedienne Jennifer Saunders, cover to cover, the non-issue challenge stereotypes.
What I love about this is not just that the models are over 50, the designers, the photographers, the makeup artists, everyone who contributed to this are over the age of 50.
From fashion and tech, beauty tips to advice about menopause, all normalised ageing. In April 2019, 250,000 copies were distributed, 12 shoots, 24 interviews, 47 women, 111 photographs, 128 articles, created by 2 McCann offices, 7 nationalities, 9 creatives, 52 journeys, 74 edits, 101 opinions, 1 relentless WhatsApp group. With 19 million organic impressions, the non-issue was more successful than the September issue. Its positive message touched every generation, attracting more than 40,000 new readers in just 2 weeks. Our network gave L'Oréal Paris a meaningful role in women's lives and helped change perception of age for good.
From this page onwards, age discrimination ends.
Together, we can make anything a non-issue.
So pretty cool, right? I mean, back to the original premise for this whole entire discussion. How do you take a truth that might seem a little bit weird and use that to unlock creativity? By the way, best part of my job, I got to talk to Helen Mirren once. I mean, that's crazy. Like, I got to interview Helen Mirren. Who does that? Anyway, just personal, like, happiness. Okay, so sometimes what we're doing is we're actually looking for a way to understand the dissonance between truths that come out of different markets. So this next one is a story about that, and it's the story of understanding the relationship between data and innovation. We've done a study now a couple of times called The Truth About Privacy. And I think the first time, it might have been quite early on when I arrived, the first time we were doing this study, I was like, privacy? What does that have to do with anything? Well, now it actually has to do with everything. So it's really good that we were monitoring this and doing this. And what we have found is there's actually an incredibly uncomfortable relationship between data and innovation. And that is because of this privacy conversation. So us doing this piece of research really, really helps us. And again, sometimes we're looking for the dissonance between 2 parts of the world. This is a really interesting piece. When we look at how China and how people in China feel about their privacy and feel about their data, they're pretty open. They know that all of it is being used and looked at anyways. And I can say that out loud because we have this piece from True Central that tells us such. Now in the US, it's half of this. And that's a pretty big difference. So sometimes we're trying to understand that difference. And one of the things that we actually are trying to understand is how that relates to, for our clients' business, these privacy concerns or these privacy openness, if you think of it that way, how that affects the shopping experience, how that affects retail, how it affects our people getting connected to the brands that we sell. And one of the things that the team in True Central did is they did a whole segmentation study to really analyze, and this is in the US, the different blends or the different types of people, their attitudes about privacy. From the most eager extrovert, like I'll pretty much share everything, all the way to what we called walled warriors, people that don't want to share a thing, and how nervous that makes them about their own data, their own life, etc., right? So you can understand, you probably know lots of people that fall into these different areas. And the reason that we do this thing is, again, to help clients navigate this and to figure out what they want to do, what their privacy strategy should be. Now, one of the things that we also found, which helped us unpack this, is that when it comes to something that is very useful to you, and things may be useful to you for different reasons. If you're a parent, if you're maybe an even new parent, you have suddenly realized that you have absolutely zero time. So guess what? Something that actually does something for you because you have zero time, or something that helps you hack your life a little bit, you're gonna give some of your data for that. That's worth it for you. So these different life stages layered on top of these different segments are really important for us to understand to help our clients make some of these decisions. Because the bigger truth behind this is that data isn't all evil, right? It can be the key to unlock some of these deeper relationships and deeper connections between brands and our people, and make humans want to actually buy those brands a little bit more, push the loyalty. Now we have to handle that data with care. And this kind of gave birth to something that is one of my, again, favorites of what actually we have been able to build with some of the data in True Central, is a new notion of the hierarchy of compensation. We first presented this at Web Summit. Sean, who's back there? Sean and I co-presented at Web Summit, and Web Summit is a very interesting event where actually it attracts a lot of tech startups, a lot of people trying to understand how to unleash the possibilities when it comes to technology, and particularly this year, there was a big conversation the year that we were there around data and around privacy, and what does everybody do about that? Does that unleash innovation, or is that something we should all be scared of, right? So we talked about this hierarchy of compensation in that audience, and it was incredibly useful. We've now used it with a retail conference, just to give you guys examples of some of the places that we go. We've used it with retail clients. We've combined the privacy data with truth about shopping and truth about commerce data to, again, help us have a more robust understanding of what this means. Let me explain it to you. It's pretty simple. At the most basic level, if people give a little bit of their data, so think about yourself. Maybe you give your name, maybe you give your address. You just give the bare minimum of data. That's pretty transactional, right? And that's like, you're probably pretty okay with that, okay? And maybe that gives you a coupon. Maybe that gives you a 10% off or a 15% off. You signed up for the email list, you get 15% off, boom, okay? The next layer of this hierarchy compensation, you give a little bit more data, you expect that your brand experience is going to be a little bit better, right? It's not just 10% off. There's something a little bit better that's going to happen, and we would call that, it makes it more efficient, makes it efficient. Maybe it's faster, maybe you don't have to cash in when you're checking out, etc., right? Third layer of this hierarchy of compensation gets a little bit more. You give a little bit more data and more, you expect a deeper brand relationship, right? Maybe they're curating choices for you. Maybe they're serving up things for you. Maybe they're making you feel that you're part of a community. We would call that layer of compensation belonging. And then the highest layer is actually self-actualization, taking a page from Maslow's hierarchies for you nerdy nerds out there like me, and really just thinking about when you give even more of that data, you expect a lot in return. You expect that company to be using your data ethically. You also expect to feel part of a community. You also expect things to be easier. You expect the efficiency. You expect it to make your life better. That's a pretty big, deep relationship. So what we do with this kind of stuff is we meet with our clients and we say, where do you want to play here? One isn't bad or worse than the other. It's just you have to have a strategy when it comes to data, when it comes to privacy, and what you want to do with that data that you take. And this is a much more enlightened conversation than just, hi, we're here to make your website, right? So this is, again, just showing how we use all the different data points. You take that a step further, and you apply that, and the reason that clients need to listen to us about this is something like this. 74% of people globally think that stores care more about their data than their experience. So what I just showed you on the page before isn't happening. People aren't being careful with that data. They're not giving back enough. So what an opportunity for us, again, to apply some creativity and to figure out how to solve this differently for our clients. I want to show you an example. Some of you, many of you may have seen this because it's quite famous. It's from our office in Tel Aviv. But knowing that truth I just showed you about not actually using data, this is a great example of how it can unlock some creativity for a very large retailer brand.
Although I have cerebral palsy, I do everything I can to conduct myself like everyone else. But in my own home, I'm surrounded with furniture crying out, "Cripple." I'd like to sit on a regular sofa without being afraid I won't be able to get up.
IKEA's vision is to create a better everyday life for the many. Disabled gives simple and affordable home furnishings for 10% of the population.
Every child, every person is different depending on their needs.
Disability drives innovation.
Even in some of our public libraries, there's 3D printers.
A lot of the solutions, they've been very medicalized down through the years, and nothing as cool as anything you've produced.
ועכשיו אנחנו רוצים להראות לכם יוזמה מיוחדת של רשת איקאה שנקראת Disabled.
יוזמה חשובה שתקל על אנשים עם מוגבלויות. איקאה, עם ארגון נגישות.
Sorry, I got so excited I forgot to pick up my microphone. So you can see, and sometimes what I'm trying to get across to you, sometimes you're using these truths to help clients make brave decisions. And there's a lot of data behind this, obviously. There's identifying the population, there's identifying the need, there's figuring out how to do it, but this is quite bold for a company to do. But when you use that to our advantage, we can really solve problems in a totally different light. All right, my last chapter is another piece that I thought was really, again, and I think the whole team, we looked at some of this stuff and scratched our heads and couldn't quite figure it out. But this comes from when we did, frankly, Truth About Global Brands, and we started to find a whole bunch of stuff out that had very little to do with brands per se, and a lot more to do with humans and the human condition, and what they thought was going on in their markets and in the world at large, and how brands should understand that to fit into their world. And one of the things that we found when we did that study is we were asking people about, and again, back to brands, we're trying to figure out how to do something a little bit better for them. The number one thing that would make both politicians and CEOs better at their jobs is if they had a better understanding of ordinary people like me. And that word was very specific, ordinary people like me. So we said, what does that really mean? What does ordinary mean? And as we delved even deeper, we found that ordinary meant diversity. It meant I'm different than the person next to me who's different than the person next to me as well. And so if our brand CEOs, if politicians understood that, that would be immensely more powerful. So we dug a little bit deeper into that, and I think a lot of you know this from our Day for Meaning work that we did. Diversity is very different, region by region, market by market. Whereas diversity in one part of the world may be race or gender, diversity in another part of the world is an understanding and acceptance of religion or origins, right? Or even some of the things that come out of political perspectives. So understanding that it's not a binary definition really can lead us to very different work when we have clients, and many of them do, say, help me with my diversity strategy. What do I do? Is that front-facing? Do I put it out into the world? Or is that something I do internally? And we do end up advising our clients on a lot of this because we have the data to do it. When you look even deeper, you find that 87% of global millennials agree that it's important to be inclusive and welcoming to all kinds of people. So when our clients aren't thinking about diversity, we show them this and say, do you want to get the people who are the biggest part of the population coming into your franchise, or do you not? Because if you want to really attract those types of people, you have to understand what's going on in their minds. And again, this is why this human-centric data is so important to us. Because the big truth when it comes to this is that understanding diversity on a local level unlocks the most powerful solutions. So if you know that 87% of millennials, who again you want to attract to your brand, actually think it's incredibly important to be inclusive, you better understand what inclusivity means in your part of the world. And that helps us get to ideas like a fearless girl or like an acceptance street. We know that gender is a huge piece of the puzzle here in the US, okay? So that's why we can do some of these things. And I'm just trying to share these stories with you because hopefully you then use truths. And I don't mean that in a weird way, like use them. What I mean is use them to help clients make brave decisions. Use them to figure out how to solve problems. Use them to help us unleash the creativity that is in our company all over the world. And hence why there's different examples. And if you want to learn more about that, we have a whole bunch of stuff to help you do it, which leads to the next section that I want to talk to you about and how to get to some of these truths that we're talking about. Okay, very exciting. I hope most of you know that there's this thing called the Truth Engine that all of your strategists now have access to. So the Truth Engine, and I'm just going to let this run while I talk about it, no sound guys, so you don't have to worry, is a place where you can peruse and hunt for the 25 million data points that comprise our truths. And you can create your own points of view. You can use them in different ways. This is like a dream come true. We've talked about trying to do this for a very long time. We finally have the technology to do it. So not only are the data points on there, the studies are on there, perspectives are on there that True Central and the strategists have written. There's other intellectual property on there from other McCann Worldgroup companies, right? So go on there, like if you are stymied for something, if you're working on something and you can't figure it out, you could go take a walk, get a coffee, fine. But you could also go in the Truth Engine and see what's there and see what sparks you to think about solving something a little bit differently. And I think that's an important piece of it. This will become more and more vital as we keep populating it and as we keep going. But you can see there's lots of different bits. And our intention, by the way, is to go beyond the strategy community with this. But for now, you need to bother your local strategist and you need to ask them to help you peruse this stuff. It's incredibly important that we all use it because I probably neglected to say, this is proprietary information. If you're in a competitive pitch or if you're working on a piece of business where you're sharing some of that business with another agency, that other agency doesn't have this. They do have Mintel. They do have all the other data sources like Forrester. They don't have this. And they don't have the ways that we as humans combine these pieces of information to help us do amazing things for our brands. Okay. Finally, I've already said this, all the data is on there, all the content is on there. Importantly, just some other tips to give to you. Why would you use something like this? You can use it during your truth hunting on Truth to Meaning. It's really good for 5 C's. You can use it before a presentation. You can use it to spark a different conversation with a client that you've ever had. You can use it for briefing. Believe it or not, I'll be the voice of the creatives. They love this stuff. You give them some little nugget that they hadn't thought of, it sparks them in a totally different direction. In fact, the messy war room that I showed you, we can't get Rob Riley out of there. It's kind of annoying. He's in there all the time seeing what we're digging up, which is really good. And then obviously creating thought leadership, and that's the thing I shared with you today. Take some of these things. I bet you most of your clients have something called a lunch and learn. You can present at a lunch and learn by taking some of these goodies and bringing it to them. I bet you guys have opportunities to present to your teams. Take it and create something interesting for your teams to provoke them. But make your own thought leadership from this. Whenever I get asked to do a speech, the first place I go is Truth Central and say, hey, I've been asked to come, like this nerd thing that I did. Hey, I was asked to come do this thing. There's this guy from NASA coming, which makes me really nervous. Let's have a think about what could be really interesting for that particular audience. And by the way, when you're there, you never know who's in the audience. There's clients, there's prospects, there's potential talent. I've had more potential talent come from this speech that I just did than any other speech I've ever done. So that was very worthwhile, I think. And hopefully some of them will be hired here, which will be great. We have ways to train everybody how to use them. So there's Introduction to the Truth Engine. There's a class, I guess it's a class, right, called School of Stats. So if statistics don't make you as excited as they make me, and maybe you're nervous by them, we can teach everybody how to embrace them and understand them. It's not that hard, I promise. It's just, again, pattern recognition. And then there's pieces of intellectual property, like similar to what I presented to you today, is a format called Truth Serum. Take a core truth, understand why that truth is real, and link it to a real world story. These are great pieces of content to use with clients. So far, since we've launched the Truth Engine, how long has it been? James, India, how long? 2 months? 2 months, okay. So we've had a lot of emails of I can't get on, but otherwise, we've also had some really good verbatim feedbacks, which is just about data on demand. I have so much data at my fingertips, instant access to useful data, especially for fast projects. This isn't like you have to call someplace and wait for them to turn something around. You can just poke around on there, and I think that's really powerful. And we even wanted to recognize very quickly, we have some super users. Super users are people who are on there using it all the time, and in very different places, frankly, and for very different reasons. So we just want to recognize, these folks, that they're really using it, and we want to learn from their usage. So we'll continue to make this thing better. But it's all net to just spend time with you guys and tell you that you have so much at your fingertips. You have things that your competitors don't have. You have things that your clients don't have. Your clients have really hard jobs, and some of their jobs are really boring. You bring a couple of juicy things like this, and it makes a whole different day for them. We met with a CEO of a very large health company recently, and she said, this is the most interesting meeting I have had in a month. And we brought some truth walls. Hillary Gentile and I got on a train, brought some truth walls, had a 32-minute conversation, and she, to this day, is saying, this is the most interesting conversation I've had in a month. You know what? When she has a big problem on her business, I know she's going to call us first of the other agencies because of that 30-minute conversation, 32 minutes. And I think that's really important for us to all to embrace. So I didn't say in the beginning that there could have been questions. I bet there's no questions because I didn't say that. But you can feel free to contact any of us if you have questions about how to use stuff, you want to learn a little bit more about how to put together presentations like this, and we'll make this available so you can use this as well, again, with clients, with speeches that you want to do. And just another interesting way to use our Truth Central stuff. Did I forget anything? It's so weird to be presenting the whole time. Usually the smart people do this. All right, and that's it. And if you want any information about Truth Engine support, that's a long email, at McCann.com is your place to go. And I thank you guys for your attention, and thank you all over the world for tuning in. And this will be available again as it is. Okay, great. Thanks.